There are moments in life that hit you like a ton of bricks. Moments when you realize that the very people you've sacrificed so much for, the people you loved with all your heart, can turn on you in a heartbeat. For me, that moment came when my daughter, my only child, couldn't invite me to her wedding. The wedding that should have been the happiest day of her life, but instead became a painful reminder of everything I had lost and everything I never thought I would lose. I remember the first time I held her in my arms. The day she was born was the happiest day of my life. I promised myself I would always be there for her. Through every scraped knee, every school play, every milestone in her life, I would be the father she could count on. I gave her everything, my time, my energy, my heart. The love I had for her was the kind of love that never fades, a love that was supposed to be unbreakable, but life has a way of complicating things. My marriage to Sarah, my ex-wife, was never perfect. Like any relationship, it had its highs and lows, but we made it work. At least I thought we did. We had our differences, sure, but we were a team, or so I believed. And then Sarah found someone else. That was the beginning of the end. When Sarah had the affair, it felt like the ground beneath me collapsed. I didn't see it coming. I had no idea that she had fallen out of love with me or that she had found someone else. It was like waking up in a nightmare. The betrayal cut deep, deeper than anything I could have imagined. I wanted to fix things. I wanted to fight for our family, for my daughter, but Sarah had already made up her mind. She filed for divorce, and that was the end of our marriage. But even that wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was what came after the divorce, what Sarah did next. She moved on quickly, diving into a new relationship while I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered heart. I couldn't understand how she could move on so fast, especially when we had built a life together. But what hurt even more was what she did to our daughter. Sarah began poisoning my daughter's mind against me. She didn't want her to see me as the man who had always been there for her. Instead, she painted me as the villain, someone who had failed her, someone who wasn't good enough. Every time our daughter would come home, Sarah would subtly plant seeds of doubt. "Your father never supported me," she would say. "He never understood me. You're better off without him." Slowly, over time, my daughter's affection for me started to fade. I could see the change in her eyes, the shift in how she saw me. It was as though she was being programmed to think that I wasn't worthy of her love. I tried everything I could to hold on to her. I called, I wrote letters, I reached out, but nothing seemed to break through the wall Sarah had built between us. I didn't want to fight with my ex-wife in front of our daughter, but I couldn't help but feel like I was losing her. And yet, no matter how much I tried to explain to my daughter that it wasn't like that I wasn't the enemy, the distance between us grew. Years passed, and my daughter grew up. She went to college, met someone, and eventually got engaged. The day she told me about her fiancé, I felt a strange mixture of happiness and fear. I was proud of her, but I couldn't help but feel nervous. I had spent years watching her drift away from me, and now she was about to take one of the most important steps of her life. Without me. At first, I didn't think much of it. I thought, surely she would want me there for such an important event in her life. She was my daughter, after all. But as the wedding day drew closer, I realized something. I hadn't received an invitation. I didn't want to believe it. I convinced myself it was an oversight. But when I asked her about it, my heart sank. She gave me an excuse, something about the guest list being too big, or her mother having a say in who should be there. I didn't press the issue. I didn't want to seem desperate, but deep down I felt the sting of being left out. It wasn't until a week before the wedding that the truth became painfully clear. My daughter wasn't inviting me to her wedding. When I called her to ask why, I could barely hold it together. I asked her, "Why? Why am I not invited? I'm your father. I've been there for you every step of the way. How could you do this?" Her response was cold, distant. "Dad, you know things have been difficult between us. Mom's been through a lot, and I just can't." Her voice cracked slightly, but she wouldn't look me in the eye when we spoke. There was a hesitation there, a reluctance. "To face the truth, don't you want me there? Don't you need me there?" I asked. She paused. And then she said something that tore my heart into pieces. "It's just complicated, Dad. You'll understand someday." But I couldn't understand. I didn't know what was happening, what had changed. All I knew was that the daughter I had raised, the girl who used to look up to me, the girl who had once been my whole world, was now keeping me at arm's length. I tried to make sense of it. My mind was racing, trying to piece together everything that had happened. But then I realized the truth. This wasn't just about the wedding. It wasn't just about a single moment. It was about everything that had led up to this. Sarah had won. After all these years of manipulation, she had finally succeeded in turning our daughter against me. My daughter no longer saw me as the loving father who had been there for her through everything. She saw me as the man who had failed her, the man who wasn't worthy of being in her life. The lies Sarah had told her over the years had worked. My daughter couldn't see past the narrative that had been created, a narrative that painted me as the villain in her life. I'll never forget that moment, the moment I realized that my daughter had chosen to side with her mother, that she had bought into the lies. I sat in my car that night, trying to hold back tears. I had always thought I would be there for her on her wedding day. I imagined walking her down the aisle, proud to be her father. But now I wasn't even invited to witness the most important day of her life. It felt like a punch to the gut. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made for her. The late nights, the long hours, the times I had put her needs before my own. All of that seemed to have meant nothing. It was as though all the years of love and care were erased by a few words, a few lies that had been planted in her mind. And the worst part? She didn't even know it. It's been a long time since that conversation. I still haven't fully healed from the pain of being excluded from my daughter's wedding. There are days when I still pick up the phone to call her, only to remember that she doesn't want me in her life. But I've come to realize that I can't force her to see the truth. I can't control her feelings. All I can do is live with the choices I've made, and the choices she's made. Maybe one day she'll come to understand the truth. Maybe she'll realize that I was never the villain in this story. Maybe she'll see the sacrifices I made for her and the love I've always had for her. But for now, all I can do is wait and hope. Hope that the bond we once had will someday be restored. To anyone watching this who's going through something similar, whether it's a broken relationship with a child or the pain of being excluded from a significant event, I want you to know that you're not alone. Family is complicated. Sometimes the people you love most can hurt you in ways you never expected. But that doesn't mean you stop loving them. It just means you have to accept what you can't control and find peace within yourself. I don't know if I'll ever be a part of my daughter's life the way I once was, but I do know that I will always love her, no matter what. And maybe, just maybe, one day, she'll see that. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.